where the North Node is moving, which is now Aries for 18 months through your horoscope, is where you're being asked to eat the sun. In other words, take some strategic risks. Don't be afraid. Be courageous. The South Node is going through Libra, which doesn't say let go of your relationships, but it is suggesting let go of trying to be too fair when fairness is not an option.
This podcast episode is sponsored by Astrology Hub's Academy. Wherever you are on your astrology journey, we have a class that will help you get to the next level.
Hi there. Welcome to Weekly Astrological Weather. I am so grateful that you have joined this weekly worldwide astrological conversation. Now, if you're new to this channel, I definitely want to extend a very warm welcome. Thank you for stopping by. Definitely don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you can stay updated on all of our current releases because we have a ton of content that we like to share with you. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Jamie McGee. I'm an author, astrologer, and one of the hosts here at Astrology Hub on the podcast platform. All right, so today I'm so excited for this day. I always love it when I get to connect with Georgia, but we'll be exploring the astrological influences of July 24th through July 30th with a weekly weather favorite, a 2023 Inner Circle guide, Miss Georgia Stathis. And I'm sure all of you, I love seeing all the comments every time that Georgia's up because it's just such a great amount of detail and clarity that you bring, which is understandable because Georgia has been studying and practicing astrology since 1977 and is an international teacher. Georgia, welcome back to the weekly weather.
Thank you, Jamie, and thank you, Astrology Hub, and thank you for those who are watching this. So, are we kind of ready? Should we start?
Yeah. Absolutely. And for those of you who are listening and not watching on YouTube, Georgia always has a beautiful slide deck that she presents each week with each weekly weather. So you can go over to YouTube and look at the slides that she's talking to, but she's also very clear as she describes them in her forecast for this week. All right, Georgia, let's dive in.
Okay. Hello, everybody. We are doing the weekly weather. There we go. For basically, the sun has been moving. It's been moving into Leo, and a lot of, I don't know how I get these things, but somehow I always get the right thing to talk about because there's a lot going on this week. And one of the things several things are going on within the last week or two and will continue through the next few weeks. But here's one of the things that I want to talk about, if I can get to the next slide there. So we just had a shift, actually. And I'm saying basically stop, look, and listen to everything that's going on around you right now, because the transiting North Node and the lunar nodes do run with the eclipses for those who are kind of new at this, which means that when the nodes will change, they will basically be in two opposite signs for about a year and a half, for about 18 months. And they don't come back to this position for about every 18 to 19 years. And so in many ways, if you've been on the planet long enough, you can actually go back in your life every 19 years from when these nodes begin and kind of look at some of the things that are going on that are very similar to what you might be dealing with right now. It's almost as though it is like a DNA thread that we never really stop evolving. And every time the node returns to the same position in your horoscope, every 19 years, you're getting an opportunity to go to the next level of evolution in the house that North Node is transiting through, which also means that there's an opportunity to be taking a few risks involving where that North Node is moving. But this particular North Node, which now just moved into Aries because the nodes move backwards from the late degrees of a sign all the way to the beginning degrees of the sign. This one is very, very different because this North Node in Aries and South Node at 29 Libra are also being squared for almost 9 months by Pluto. And Pluto is sitting at the fulcrum point, which is kind of like fish or cut bait, folks. Make some decisions. I'm not negotiating a deal. Those are Pluto's words. He kind of hangs it on the doorway to the underworld. So Pluto squaring the North Node right now means that this is time to stop, look, and listen at what you're doing in your life that you love and what you're doing in your life that you really need to let go of so that you can have a life. We've been in the weeds in a lot of ways with this approaching in the last few weeks. And so the question that a lot of people are asking, and I'm seeing this with my clients a lot, I don't know what to do. What should I do? I want to act, very North Node in Aries, but don't know where to start. A lot of thinking going on and a lot of having to wait. And actually, and I know people listen to this from around the world, but I know in the American culture, we're a very impatient group of people. And so this is a very difficult nodal transit for Americans in particular, anybody who has problems with patience. This is going to teach a lot of patience and a lot of ideas on how to be a little bit more strategic about your plans for the future, which means sometimes you just have to wait till you get the answer. So, but I want to talk about something before I get more into that. I want to talk about what happened a few days ago when the movement of the sun was at the late degrees of Cancer and started to oppose Pluto, which is at the last degree of Capricorn. There is something going on now that is kind of the decision-making time of something that started back in late January, because we're having an opposition between the sun and Pluto. We've been having that for a few days, and oppositions are 180-degree distances between planets. And if you think about a circle, you can't go to 181 degrees. 180 degrees is about as far as you're going to get. And it often feels like a rubber band is stretched. And if you keep stretching a rubber band, it's going to either break or you have to learn to let go of something. Oppositions, especially from the sun, which has to do with what we're doing with our lives, with Pluto, which is, for God's sake, make a decision. They make you go back and forth until a resolution is discovered. And there is a connection between the recent sun opposing Pluto, which happened about 3 days ago on July 21, and the alignment of the sun with Pluto. In other words, they were together, they were conjunct back in January 18th of 2023. When they were together at 28 degrees of Capricorn. So there was kind of a new start idea, a new seed that was planted at 28 degrees of Capricorn, wherever that falls in your chart, in early part of 2023. But now it's time to shake the trees for better answers, or for the better apples, if you will, of what needs to be done. And one of the things to do with all of this, which is sometimes difficult, especially now that the North Node is in Aries, which is ruled by Mars, and the sun is opposing Pluto, is when you don't know which road to take, try to stop to ask others for their thoughts. And then the hardest thing to do is listen. After you listen to various insights and opinions, and everybody has an opinion these days, then make a plan based on what you've been hearing and processing, and begin to triage your tasks to get to this final decision. Listening for the next 18 months while the nodes are in Aries and Libra is the best thing you can learn to master this period of time in your life. Whether you're 19 or 89 years of age, listening is going to be the key to change. And this is more of a graphic look, the lunar nodes. And I know a lot of my colleagues in Astrology Hub talk about this, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I think a visual is always very good. The nodes run with the eclipses. And, in ancient times, they really believed there was a dragon in the sky that was eating the sun. And he was eating the sun, or she was eating the sun, so that he could grow, and he had to shed skin in which to do that. So where the North Node is moving, which is now Aries for 18 months through your horoscope, is where you're being asked to eat the sun. In other words, take some strategic risks. Don't be afraid. Be courageous. Where the tail is moving for the next 18 months, which is kind of like crack the whip when we were kids, where, you're in a line of kids and you're being spun around in a circle. The last kid or two always gets thrown off. That's crack the whip. I know it sounds very dangerous, but our parents didn't care in those days. So anyway, the South Node is going through Libra, which doesn't say let go of your relationships, but it is suggesting let go of trying to be too fair when fairness is not an option. Let go of trying to be too accommodating, which doesn't get anything done. Let go of sitting on the fence all the time, waiting for other people to make decisions, and try to start making decisions yourself. But with Pluto in the fulcrum of the seesaw, or the teeter-totter, right between these two, it is also saying exercise a little caution as you make these decisions, because decisions being made right now could be lifelong changes. And so transiting Pluto, because it's sitting at the fulcrum point, asking a lot more questions than normal and requiring answers that are keys to change for 9 months, will ask you to be more daring in asking your questions. Be a little bit more courageous in asking questions, because sometimes no one else is asking the question that should be asked. And sometimes when people ask the question that should be asked, that no one's asking, that changes the energy of the room and energy of the project completely. The lunar node in Aries is about taking action, but don't waste any energy in doing too many things at the same time. This is where I said triage things. What's the most important right now? What's most important? Secondly, what's most important in the third position? Prioritize. A person who's on a successful walkabout, which is basically what the Aries energy is about, plans the basics for their survival. So what do you do first? What's the elephant in the room in your life circumstances that you are refusing to address, which actually is not something new this week? This has been going on since the April 20th eclipse of 2023. We've really been in the weeds, and even more so now, since about June 5th, because around June 5th of this year, Venus entered the sign of Leo. Usually Venus is in a sign for a few weeks, and then it moves on to the next sign. But we are, and it's actually starting this week, we are in the weeds because Venus has been slowing down since June 19th. And now as Venus begins to retrograde, which doesn't mean that everything is going to stop and go to hell in a handbasket. What it means is that it's time to review, rethink, refurbish, replenish, rework, reinvest. That's the rewords. We start figuring out a lot of exit strategies always on retrogrades. And since Venus has a lot to do with relationships, both professional and personal, it also has a lot to do with values that we have for ourselves and for other people, and the values other people have for us. So I always like to go back a little bit. I do this with my clients. What was happening then regarding your desires, your values, your love, your relationships that you see returning now, especially in the next few weeks, for another look? And what I did here on the left is a spreadsheet, basically, of the last few times that Venus stationed very close to the degree that it's stationed on July 22nd at 28 degrees of Leo. It was very close to that degree, July 25 of 2015. It was very close to the degree, only 2 degrees of Virgo, July 27th. Interesting, all about the same dates, 2007, and a little further, but still around late July of 1999. So many times, much like when the nodes return every 19 years or Venus retrogrades, because it has a pattern in it, we are asked to revisit. So where is Venus, which just went retrograde this week, retrograding in your chart? Now I'm going to go through the list here, but we're going to have a quick little graphic for each sign. But for Aries or Aries rising people, it's happening in your 5th house. For Taurus or Taurus rising, it's happening in the 4th. For Gemini, it's happening, or Gemini rising, it's happening in the 3rd. For Cancer or Cancer rising, it's happening in the 2nd. For Leo, the 1st. Virgo, the 12th. Libra, the 11th. Scorpio, the 10th. Sag, the 9th. Capricorn, the 8th. Aquarius, the 7th. And Pisces, the 6th. And this is what it looks like visually. And before we go there, do you need to up the ante? Because Venus retrograde is about how much ante are you giving your value for yourself? Do you need to up the ante regarding your self-worth in different areas of your life? And that's why you have to look at the house in which Venus is retrograding, because this is where the action is going to be all summer long. So when Venus is retrograde in your chart, it's retrograde right now through September 5th, when it goes direct at about 12 degrees of Leo. But it doesn't really get to the place it started going retrograde till October 7th. And I think it leaves Leo somewhere around October 10th. That's a lot more than just a few weeks. That's basically about June, July, August, September. We're looking at about 5 months of very important reviews of our value for ourselves and the value we have for those we're close to, and the value that we have in our business partnerships, and the values and the differences between our wants versus our needs, because Venus is about what we desire. So Venus retrograde for Aries, that's happening in your fifth house. The fifth house is the house of children, of taking chances, of taking risks, which is why it's always assigned to dating. What are you spending on your fun? Are you spending too much money on fun? Are you spending enough on fun? Are you afraid to take a risk with a relationship? Or possibly somebody may come back from the past in a relationship, which I would say with Venus retrograde, review the relationship, but don't make any decisions until Venus goes direct. For Taurus, it's happening in their fourth house, which is usually the house of your root family that you came from. It's also your home, your family that you live with now, all the DNA of people that you didn't know before you were born. This is about reviewing things in your home. Health issues regarding family members may be coming up at this point as well. Some things that need to be fixed in our homes have to be addressed. And by the way, when we do look at retrogrades, a planet retrograde, since we're looking at Venus, you always want to look at the house that Venus rules to include it in your delineation. So in the case of Taurus, Venus rules the ascendant, which is the physical body. Venus rules Libra, which is the sixth house, which is your systems, your files. Do they need some cleaning out? Do you need to reduce your clutter? For Gemini people, it's moving through their third house, which is a Gemini house, by the way. And the third house is about our brothers and our sisters and our neighbors and the way we communicate with other people, the way we convey our communication. Have we had some disagreements recently that need to have some sort of resolution? Are we afraid to communicate in a way that we're not used to because it heralds back to the 12th house, some things we haven't dealt with in our unconscious mind? Venus is also the ruler of Libra on this chart, which is the fifth house of our children. How are you communicating with your children? Or if you don't have children, and a lot of people don't have them right now, the fifth house is also the children of the mind. What creative project are you thinking about, like a writing project, a blog, a website that you have not come up with an answer for? This is the time to reevaluate it. For Cancer people or Cancer rising people, Venus is retrograde in their second house, where they're reevaluating their spending habits. They're reevaluating wants versus needs. They're reevaluating their budgets. Since Venus is the ruler of Taurus, it could be reevaluating some of our friends that we need to help with their particular homes or family issues, since the second house is the fourth from the 11th of friends. That's a whole wonderful area of astrology called derivative houses or turning the wheel. Venus is also the ruler of the fourth house here, going through the second. How much are you spending on where you're living? Are you spending enough? Are you not spending enough? Do you need to rethink the budget? So what about, especially Leo, and Venus is in Leo right now. Venus is retrograde in the first house, which is the physical body, your identity in the world, how people see you. The rising sign is really what people first see when they look at us. They don't look at the sun sign. And that's the lens through which we see the world. The question here, since Venus is retrograde in the first house, is how fast are you going? Because this is an Aries house. Do you need to slow down a little bit? Allow yourself the luxury of others helping you instead of always doing things yourself, which is the wonderful thing about Leo is that they're great at giving. They're really lousy at receiving or asking for help. So this might be a time to, Venus rules the third house, communicate that you need a little help. And it might be in the beginning, people might not hear you because they're not used to it. So just become a very loud horn that says it so they get it over the next few weeks. For Virgo, Venus is retrograde in the 12th house, which is the house of the unconscious, where we store all those things that we really don't want to deal with. I think for Virgos especially, it also has a lot to do with self-confidence. And the 12th house is really a place to examine how confident really are you? What would happen if you asked for the order? Do you need to open up some of the things that keep you from fulfilling your life by working with somebody who's a coach or a trainer? And I think that that is a very important thing for Virgo people, because one of the things we don't say much about Virgos is that they're a very necessary part of the zodiacal order because Virgo is the processing agent, the sixth house, the natural sixth house of the zodiac, which is we have to process things through Virgo it's discriminating what's important, what's not important. It's the small intestine of the organism. We'll keep this, we don't need this. So in your own life, what things are you holding on to that you need to let go of that are keeping you from having a fulfilling life? So what about Libra or Libra, depending how you pronounce it? Venus is the ruler of Libra. It's also the ruler of Taurus, of course. And Venus is retrograde in your 11th house of friendships. Are you hanging out with the right people? Do your friends value you? Are they not valuing you? Are you thinking about maybe not staying with one organization, that you need to change the organization because it's not meeting the needs of your goals? This is the sort of thing that's happening right now. And this working with a community or working with friends or working with people in organizations may also, if you reorganize it, very clearly help you with your income because Venus is the ruler of Taurus, which is your 8th house, which is income. And of course, it is the ruler of your ascendant, which is your health. So by getting a little bit more organized about who you want to hang out with and who you don't want to hang out with, that might also make you a little healthier, both in the pocketbook and also in your body. And so what about Scorpio people? Well, they are all with Venus retrograding in their 10th house of their professional lives. They are reevaluating. Do I really want to do this profession? Is really this the thing for me to do? It could be that a boss that you're working for is thinking seriously about leaving the company that you may not know about until Venus goes direct. Just because you learn something in your industry, and this is, Scorpio is very fixed. Just because you learned something at school and you got the degree and in your industry, doesn't mean you have to stay with that industry. It means that you can take a piece of that industry and incorporate it into a new job or a new way of working. And this also does suggest that since Venus is the ruler of Taurus, which is partnerships where Jupiter is right now, that maybe talk to people you feel really close to about some ideas. This is that whole listening thing I was talking about in the beginning. And what this does is opens up a space for new options. So what about Sagittarius? It's in their 9th house. Well, that's the Sagittarius house anyway. And actually, Venus retrograde in the 9th house is about, do I want to go back to school? What about that book I've been wanting to write? What about that trip I want to take? What about that consulting idea or marketing idea I have? How can I change that? Maybe I need to finish a degree. I'm really close. I only have 6 more months and I know it's a little tight financially and it's going to mean I have to reorganize my time. Venus rules the 6th house of time management, but don't make any decisions until Venus gets a little closer. This is the time to find out where you want to travel, who you want to travel with, who you want to partner with, who you want to do a marketing thing with. That's the 9th house. And also, are your beliefs your beliefs? Is your philosophy your philosophy, or is it a compilation of media's philosophy? This is about finding out the truth, which is a thing that Sag loves anyway. And so what about Capricorn people? Well, Capricorn is reevaluating. This is very mundane, but it's important because it's an earth sign, Capricorn. Reevaluating your estate planning, reevaluating your frozen assets. Is your mortgage too high? Are you paying too much for a mortgage? Have you done an estate or a will? Even though you're young, it's always a good idea to put something together on paper. What about the ability to ask for support from other people? Something Capricorns don't do either, because the 8th house is by working with other people's resources, we gain our own. Robert Jansky always talked about the 8th house being our income, our salary. So this is also a very important time to really think about, are you doing too much for what you're getting paid for? Is it time, as Venus goes direct, to ask your employer or to ask your clients or your customers for a little bit more return on the effort you're putting out in terms of your work? And you may not want to announce it probably until about September when Venus goes direct, but these are some of the questions. This could be an excellent time to work with someone who can help you make a plan for a good financial future and allows Allow some time for it to happen. And what about Aquarians? Well, Aquarians have been going through a lot anyway, because Pluto went into Aquarius briefly at the beginning of the year. They're already in a transformation kind of cocoon mode. But Venus is retrograde in your seventh house of partnerships. And the seventh house is legal partnerships like marriages or business partnerships, but it's also how we deal with people in long-term partnerships over a long period of time. It may be a little difficult right now to ask your partners for what you want, but I would say since Venus is retrograde in Leo, that maybe a little pride needs to be set aside and open up your vulnerability to really say what you're really feeling, which is something that's really hard for Venus in Leo or Leo energy to do. And you may do it and you may not do it. But if you open yourself up a little bit and drop a little bit of the ego or the pride or the fear of being vulnerable, you might find that people really hear you. And what I'm basically saying is take a chance. And so what about Pisces people? Well, Venus is retrograde in your sixth house. That's your everyday, your files, your closets, your drawers, your health, your food, your eating habits, your exercise habits. These are all the things that need to be reevaluated or are being reevaluated right now as Venus is retrograde. And since Venus rules Taurus, which is the third house, maybe you can't do it all, but maybe you can hire some help. Maybe it's part-time help for people who know a little bit more about something you don't know anything about. Like maybe you need to reorganize your website and you don't know how to do it. Maybe it's time to find people who can help you do it so you don't get so panicked, because Pisces do get panicked very easily because they're highly sensitive. It also would suggest that by doing this, you're going to stay a lot healthier psychologically because the stress of the day-to-day getting organized will be lifted. So I know I went through that pretty quickly, but anyway. So the point I'm making is sometimes when we don't let go, and Venus retrograde in many ways is about letting go of our pride, letting go of our egos, letting go of relationships that aren't working, letting go of our attitude about our value. Sometimes when we don't let go of something, we get let go. Because that's what Venus retrograde does. Either we make a decision to let something go, or the decisions will be made for us. And it usually works together. And so with transiting Pluto squaring the nodes at the same time Venus is retrograde, this means this is possible to move forward, but it only happens if you're so incredibly resistant that the only way to change is for outside forces to do it for you, because Pluto squaring the nodes with Venus retrogrades is about making choices. And you'd be amazed at how the magical possibilities show up when you have the courage to make choices. And we also had in this last few days, Mercury, which is our communication, just squaring Uranus. So making some choices could let the genie out of the bottle, where you can instantly be in the right place at the right time when you make a choice. And I just wanted to suggest, or if you can't do it, maybe allow yourself some Neptune time and go see a movie that shows you how to do it, because sometimes there are just no words. And I just saw this a few weeks ago, and I think it's a lovely film, 3,000 Years of Longing with Tilda Swinton and Idris Elba. And this is a lovely Venus retrograde film to see. If you can't put it into words, you can see it in images. And to approach the stranger, this is about really taking a little bit of courage and going to people you don't know for help. To approach the stranger is to invite the unexpected, release a new force. Let the genie out of the bottle. It is to start a new train of events that is beyond your control. Fomenting. So put a form around the current events of this week. First of all, Pluto started squaring the nodes, which will be for about a 9-month hit. On July 25th, the moon enters Scorpio, forming the first quarter moon, which is really a good time to get organized about some of the ideas we've been talking about. On July 27th, Mercury and Venus are holding hands. In other words, they're conjunct. Call a buddy, go to lunch, take a few hours off to hang out with someone that leaves you feeling happy. The sun's been in Leo after all. A little happy never hurt anyone. July 27th, that friend or the associate in that fun meeting may be the genie in the bottle. They may be the messenger that has information for you as you reevaluate your positions throughout the summer. Tough choices elevate your life, creating fabulous possibilities. Ask for the order. And of course, Mercury enters Virgo, which is its own position on the 27th of July. And it is also staying for a long visit because Mercury is going to be going retrograde in the next few weeks, actually, very soon. We have on July 27 Vesta, which has a lot to do with investments in ourselves or investments literally in our financial life. Vesta is in a trine to the moon. And, Vesta is the goddess of ritual. And she's found, as I said, in the word investment. How long has it been since you invested in you? Ask yourself that question. If you can't answer that, then you haven't. And Mercury enters its own sign, Virgo, on the 27th. Since Mercury usually takes about 3 weeks to travel a sign, and since Mercury is retrograding at Virgo at the end of August, we're going to have weeks and weeks of Mercury traveling through Virgo, which is really going to help a lot of this facilitation of details. Mercury in Virgo is the processing agent. This again starts July 27th. Mercury in Virgo has the unique capacity to parse out what's important. So start processing. Use the time between July 24th and mid-September to get clean and move forward. Clean up your habits, coverage, your files, your dietary considerations. Spruce up a home office. Clean the refrigerator. Wipe down winter's mud from the outside doors. All great physical things to be doing while your brain and Mercury are processing the hard stuff. And again, if you can't do it all yourself, get yourself a Mr. or Ms. Clean. And finally, in the last few days and continuing through the week, Pallas Athena is an asteroid. She has and is conjoining transiting Mars in Virgo. Adventure is likely to have an influence on your relationships right now. This can mean that you're an independent, needing an equally independent partner, or that you need plenty of freedom to assert yourself in partnerships. You're likely to be assertive in your partnerships, unafraid of confrontation, particularly while Venus is retrograde and who often takes on a more Martian tone. And that is true. When Venus goes retrograde, she's not as tactful, shall we say, as when she's direct. She gets a little bit more Marsy. So since Venus is staying retrograde all summer, try to vet out potential partnerships. Athena is the goddess of strategic thinking. If she agrees with your journey or your effort or your direction, she gifts you with remarkable tools because she gives you tools if she agrees with your destination. If she doesn't agree with your choices, she will set obstacles so that you finally get it. And, if you have an idea that you're getting lots of obstacles and intuitively you're getting it's not going to work, it's probably correct. By the way, the last time Mars and Mercury and Venus were all together, last time this happened was March 17th of 2020. But it was in different signs then and now. So my question, if you can go back in time and look at these conjunctions of Athena with Mars, what was happening in March 17th of 2020? I know this is probably about the time that we had the pandemic being announced in the world. And so now this is the first time since that happened where we're having it again together. So, and how did you pivot your circumstances then? And so how are you going to pivot your circumstances now? And finally, since Venus is retrograde this week and staying retrograde all summer, being autonomous doesn't always mean that you have to stay alone. Autonomy works best in valued partnerships.
Such a great broadcast, Georgia. Oh my God. I love that we were able to spend so much time on the nodes in Pluto because that's an epic transit that we're going to be dealing with for a long time. And sometimes if when you start going through, like a lot of those challenges, you just need to know where you are in the storm and when it's going to be over.
Right.
I love that you're able to really articulate that for everyone this week because it's a long journey and it's like, knowing where you are and we've got some great other energy kind of working in to kind of kickstart it. And I love how astrology is a pattern and you can always remember.
It's a pattern. This is the thing. Once you do this a long time, you can go back. When was Venus very close to this degree? When was this conjunction happening before? And of course, if you have a good memory, it helps.
Or the journals,
or
yeah.
diaries,
Yeah.
because it is amazing how things will come back. And the difference though between the North Node now just into Aries as opposed to 19 years ago, 2003 or 2004, 1985, the difference between all those other times and now is Pluto is sitting at the fulcrum point. And
Yeah.
Pluto takes no prisoners. Pluto makes you make a choice.
Yes.
And sometimes the choices have to be choices of things that you're unwilling to let go of.
Yeah.
And it's not like it's going to happen overnight. It's about a good 9 months, all the way through the end of this year, I think. But it doesn't have to be painful. Baby steps.
Yeah, absolutely, baby steps. And I love how you called out the weeds too, because I feel like I've actually said that sentence several times today with clients, like, because that is we get so caught up in the trigger or the thing, this moment, and not understanding, okay, this is part of a bigger piece of the puzzle. So we can step back and figure out what our destination is, what we really want. Sometimes that's makes it easier to make the decisions, or they make it maybe not easier, but I guess it gives you the clarity. Like, I need to make this
Yeah.
decision for this reason. But when we're always looking back or bracing for what's next, then we really kind of set ourselves up to not see the opportunities hidden in plain sight. So we want to really kind of work with the transformation and lean into it. Um, and, w- work with Pluto instead of against him and the transition. Yeah.
I failed to mention this, but as Venus is retrograde now at 28 Leo, it is trining the node. So this is actually a confirmation that maybe this is the time to take baby step risks.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't have to be extreme. I don't know why people are I'm going to either leave my job, or I'm going to leave my partnership. What are the little things that you can do? It's a big middle.
Here's a big middle. Like, if you do want to leave a job, what do you need to leave the job? And does that require you
Right.
stay for this amount of time? If you do need to leave the relationship, what does that do? How can you prepare for it for your children? Or if you're trying to move, like, it's just like, instead of going from, it's not a snap your finger process. And if you can think through that, especially if you're in a very tense situation, if you know, okay, by this time I'm
Mhm.
leaving, then that takes the pressure off of it because it doesn't feel like I'm stuck. I'm stuck in this whirlwind. So definitely, yeah, the planning, the baby steps, all great advice. Always, Georgia.
And I also, one more thing about Venus retrogrades, I think this is not a bad time to discuss with your partners, whether they're personal, professional, or friends, some of the things that need to be discussed, you know, for people to listen. First of all, the hard questions and the hard discussions. That's what a Venus retrograde is really about. And if you need a neutral party, especially in a partnership, whether it's personal or professional, find a good coach, a neutral party. Find the Pluto rules therapist, which is hysterical. Find a really good therapist to help you work through whatever this thing is, so that when the decision time comes, it's not like, well, I'm out of here. It's okay. It's mutual.
Right.
And that makes for a very healthy, actually long-term relationship, even though you may not be with these
Right.
people.
Yeah. Because you're closing karmic loops, which is a lot
Right.
of
Right.
like, you want to, because if you don't close it with this situation, it shows up with a different face in a different place. And then it's a pattern that you don't want to be repeated. But, and I often find myself saying this too, is sometimes, like, especially during retrogrades, our ghosts come back. And so it's like this
Yes.
relationship. So it's like, okay, that's a ghost. What's the lesson? And some people will be like, well, I thought I passed that lesson. You did. This is just that quiz on the long side. Did
The
the
test.
test. Do you lean in, or are you gonna, like, no, I know where this is gonna go. I've been here and I go in this direction. So it's not that you never get to see that, but when things show up in a different face and place, you definitely want to, know how you feel. And then it's because sometimes you think that you work through that, but
Yeah.
Pluto will pull it up and say, you haven't worked through this. Let's do it now, and let's and pass through it. So those are all great opportunities to seize as we work through the rest of the summer and here in the US, and then move into this side of the world. It's winter for some of our listeners out there. But as we
Right.
work through this season, it's a good time to do that. If you have a trigger, kind of pull that up. And I like how it was stop, look, and take action. Like, that's what we're doing right now. We're just going to make sure that we're having that grounded decision, listening. I love that too. Listen more than you speak, because yeah, that's because I think I think you would agree too. When you listen, you can almost hear the fear or the anxiety or like where the other person is coming from. But if we speak, then we're trying to convince someone to agree with us. If we listen, we can understand why they think the way they do or feel the way they do, and approach the situation with more compassion, like Saturn and Pisces. Like, let me meet you where you are, or let me agree to love you from the distance. Like, there's so many different energies asking us to like, really, ascend to the next story in our lives all at the same
Mhm.
time. So good.
I like what you said, the karmic loop.
Yeah.
I think you said karmic loop. That's a really good phrase, because I do think people do come back in our lives on Venus retrogrades, and it's often somebody that we think, like you said, we had closure with, but we really didn't.
Yeah, we don't yeah. I've seen that a lot, even like, I see it at, like, every age and every kind of relationships, but it's,
Mhm.
like, old bosses, old friends, old crushes, or someone who even if it's not them, like, someone who looks just like them comes back
Oh,
up.
yeah. Oh,
They
yeah.
like, what was the lesson? How do you embrace this differently? Because we live in a current modern world, but we think if we hit delete, block, that you're out of our life, but it doesn't work like that with on a soul level, like, it's still there, and so you have to kind of beat it out, and, the lesson's gonna find you, and it's there to help you grow. The test is to
Mhm.
have inner strength, for the purpose that you have to be on this planet right now. If you're here, you've got
Yeah.
a purpose. You got a job to do. Yeah.
And that's a very good point too. I mean, we're not here by accident.
No.
It's not an accident that any of us showed up,
Right.
so, and that's part of the value for yourself, a lot of people are down and out right now, and I get it, but every person has a value.
They do.
And the Venus retrograde is about how much do I really value myself as well, and that's why old relationships will come back, I think, sometime, because the way you valued yourself then is very different than if you've evolved the way you value yourself now. And that's what you need to see so you
Yes.
don't keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over again.
Yes. Ye
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
It's easier said than done, no doubt, because
easier said than done.
but it's good to be aware of it, and it was even, like, knowing that like, the last time Venus was there, I was like, "What happened to me in that year?" And one of the things I remembered were new neighbors moving in. I was like, "Well, the likelihood of that's about nil because I live on, like, 40 acres," and then yesterday, new neighbors moved in next door and, like, rode up to the fence to say hi, and I was like, "Okay." Like,
Oh my God, that's so funny. See, this
yeah.
this this stuff works.
You can't make it up, no. Then my like, 8 years ago, my neighbors, like, you could pass sugar, the houses were so tight. This year, no, I have to drive, like, a four-wheeler, but sure enough, it was like, "Hey, you're new." And, like but yeah, but there's patterns, and I've also seen other patterns, like, in different areas of my life, not just something, but you'll when you start sitting with it, you'll see your pattern, you're like, "Okay, how did I react differently?" But
Mhm.
it was really kinda funny because I had said something to my husband and kids the night before about "Oh, this pattern's coming up," and when we saw the king coming at us, we all just kinda looked at each other like, "Oh, man, she did it again." Like, she just kinda called it like that because we never even saw a for sale sign. It was kinda funny, but yeah, it's very interesting to find your patterns and kinda look within because, what you love or dislike about someone's always it's coming from inside, and if you can handle that, then the reflection and what you bring in is gonna be so much different, and I love all the great gems you gave us to work with this week, Georgia. It's always such a pleasure. I know we're gonna have you back soon. I can't wait to see you then too.
We'll see you soon.
All right. Yeah. And if you guys would like to learn more from Georgia, she does have a mastery class in our academy and it's called Planetary Phases. This is a brilliant class that really helps you kind of work with these patterns and energy. You can find that at astrologyhub.com/phases with Georgia. All right. And then we'll see you again here soon. But I want to thank all of you for tuning in this episode, for being a part of our community, and always for making astrology a part of your life. We'll catch you on the next episode.
Thanks, Jamie. Bye.